Rebecca looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not family anymore, Mom. Patricia is." I smiled calmly and handed her the apple pie I'd made. What she didn't know was that I owned half the properties in this neighborhood, including the one she thought belonged to her. By the end of this story, she'd be begging me to take her back, but it would be far too late. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been replaced by an in-law in your own family. And make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this revenge story will change how you think about family loyalty forever. My name is Catherine Morrison, and at 67 years old, I thought I understood every possible way a heart could shatter. I was catastrophically wrong. The agony that tore through my chest on Independence Day 2023 was unlike anything I could have imagined, so brutal and complete that it left me gasping for air and questioning everything I believed about love, sacrifice, and the daughter I had devoted my entire life to raising. It began with what appeared to be an innocent scheduling mix-up, the sort of confusion that happens in busy families juggling multiple commitments during holiday season. But as I stood on Rebecca's immaculate front porch that sweltering Tuesday afternoon, clutching a homemade apple pie that had taken me 3 hours to perfect, listening to the sounds of celebration drifting from her backyard, the devastating truth crashed over me like ice water. This wasn't a misunderstanding at all. This was deliberate. This was planned. This was the cruelest thing my own child had ever done to me. 3 weeks earlier, I had received what I believed was a warm invitation to Rebecca's annual 4th of July barbecue. The text message seemed casual, almost hurried. "Mom, you're definitely coming to the 4th barbecue, right? Same time as always. Can't wait to see you." My heart had soared reading those words, anticipating another precious day with my family. Rebecca, my only child and the center of my universe, had been hosting these gatherings for 6 years running. Ever since she and Michael purchased their stunning Tudor-style home in the prestigious Riverside Heights neighborhood of North Carolina, it had become our most cherished tradition, one I counted down to all year long. I had immediately responded with enthusiasm. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart. Should I bring my famous apple pie?" Her reply came quickly. "Of course. See you at 2 p.m. sharp." For 3 long weeks, I had planned every detail with the excitement of a schoolgirl. I purchased a festive new outfit, a crisp white blouse with navy polka dots, and matching slacks that made me feel elegant and patriotic. I spent hours perfecting my apple pie recipe, the same one passed down from my grandmother, with its flaky butter crust and cinnamon-spiced filling that Rebecca had proclaimed her absolute favorite since childhood. I even bought sparklers for Sophie and Oliver, remembering how Rebecca used to dance around our backyard with them when she was their age, her face glowing with pure joy. The morning of July 4th arrived with oppressive humidity that promised afternoon thunderstorms. I woke before dawn, my stomach fluttering with anticipation. It had been 6 weeks since I'd seen my family, the longest stretch yet. Michael's pharmaceutical consulting business kept them traveling constantly, while Rebecca's real estate empire demanded every spare moment. Between her career managing luxury property sales and coordinating their children's packed schedules, finding time for her widowed mother had become increasingly challenging. I spent the morning in my cozy kitchen, the heart of my modest ranch home where I'd lived for 38 years. This was the same kitchen where I'd taught Rebecca to crack eggs and measure flour, where we'd decorated countless birthday cakes and shared our deepest secrets over hot chocolate on winter nights. The familiar ritual of rolling pie dough and peeling apples calmed my nerves and filled me with warm memories. This pie would be absolutely perfect. Golden brown crust with delicate leaf patterns, aromatic filling that would make the whole house smell like heaven. I could already picture Rebecca's delighted smile when she tasted it, the way her eyes would close in bliss just like when she was 7 years old. At exactly 1:30 p.m., I carefully nestled the pie in my special carrier and loaded my car with sparklers and a bottle of vintage wine I'd been saving for a special celebration. The 20-minute drive through tree-lined suburban streets took me past house after house decorated with American flags and patriotic bunting. Children splashed in driveways while parents fired up grills and arranged picnic tables. The whole neighborhood buzzed with festive energy. Rebecca's exclusive neighborhood was particularly spectacular. Every mansion seemed to be hosting an elaborate party, with luxury cars lining the pristine streets and the tantalizing aroma of gourmet barbecue hanging heavy in the humid air. I had to park 4 blocks away, which meant carrying the pie while walking in the oppressive heat, but nothing could diminish my excitement. As I approached Rebecca's house, classic rock music, mixed with children's laughter and adult conversation, floated over the tall privacy fence surrounding their backyard. Through gaps in the wooden slats, I caught glimpses of colorful decorations hanging from ancient oak trees and smoke rising from Michael's professional-grade grill setup. Everything looked picture-perfect for another magical family celebration. I climbed the front steps, carefully balancing the pie carrier while smoothing my blouse. The front door was closed, unusual for one of their parties, but I assumed they were keeping the air conditioning contained. I pressed the doorbell and waited, my heart racing with excitement as I listened to the muffled celebration behind the house. After what felt like an eternity, I heard footsteps approaching. The deadbolt clicked, and the door swung open to reveal Rebecca looking absolutely stunning in a flowing white sundress adorned with red and blue accessories. Her golden hair was styled in perfect beach waves, her makeup flawless despite the humidity. She could have graced the cover of a magazine about effortless summer entertaining. But the moment our eyes met, her expression transformed completely. The radiant smile that had been lighting up her face vanished instantly, replaced by something I'd never witnessed before. Not mere surprise, but something cold and calculating that made my blood freeze. "Mom," she said, her voice eerily flat and controlled. "What are you doing here?" The question hit me like a physical assault. I actually stumbled backward, nearly dropping the pie carrier. "What do you mean?" I managed to stammer, forcing a laugh that sounded desperate even to my own ears. "I'm here for the barbecue. We discussed this weeks ago. I brought my apple pie." Rebecca's jaw clenched visibly. She stepped outside and pulled the door firmly closed behind her, as if she didn't want the guests inside to overhear our conversation. The July heat immediately enveloped us both, but I felt ice cold inside. "Mom, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding," she said, refusing to meet my eyes. "This year's party is different. It's smaller, more intimate, more exclusive." "Smaller?" I repeated, completely bewildered. Through the windows, I could clearly see the house was packed with people, more crowded than any previous year. "Rebecca, I don't understand. You specifically invited me. You sent me a text 3 weeks ago." "No, I didn't invite you," she said, her voice so cold and matter-of-fact that it took several seconds for the words to register. "I invited Michael's mother. Patricia has been struggling terribly since her divorce, and we wanted to make this celebration special for her." Patricia Whitman, a woman who had never hidden her conviction that her successful son had settled for someone beneath his social status when he married Rebecca. A woman who had spent 6 years making subtle digs about my simple lifestyle, my modest home, my middle-class background. A woman who treated me like an embarrassing relic from Rebecca's past that should be politely ignored. But you said I could come," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You asked me to bring the pie. You said same time as always." Rebecca's expression didn't soften. If anything, it became even more rigid. "I think you completely misunderstood our conversation. I was asking if you were planning your own family gathering, not inviting you to ours." The words hung in the suffocating air between us like a slap across my face. I stared at my daughter, this woman I had carried for 9 months, raised for 18 years, supported through college, celebrated through her wedding, comforted through every crisis, and I didn't recognize her at all. "Rebecca," I said quietly, my voice trembling, "this has been our tradition for 6 years. I've never missed a single celebration." "Well, traditions evolve," she replied with a casual shrug. "People grow, families change, priorities shift. I'm sure you understand." Behind her, through the frosted glass panels of the front door, I could see shadows moving around, people laughing, enjoying themselves, celebrating without me. A woman's voice I recognized as Patricia's rang out loudly, clearly holding court as the guest of honor. My replacement. "I don't understand," I whispered, my voice breaking. "What did I do wrong? What changed?" For just a fleeting moment, Rebecca's carefully constructed mask slipped, and I glimpsed something beneath. Guilt, perhaps, or uncertainty. But it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by that same cold indifference. Nothing specific happened, Mom. This isn't about you personally. We're just doing things differently this year. Patricia really needs family support right now during her transition. And I'm not family, I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. But I was beyond caring about keeping the peace. Rebecca's eyes flashed with irritation. Of course you're family, but Patricia is Michael's mother, and Michael is my husband. His family takes priority now. The casual cruelty of that statement, delivered so matter-of-factly as if it were the most natural thing in the world, knocked the breath from my lungs. I felt like I was drowning while standing upright, holding a pie made with love for people who had just informed me I was unwanted. Mom, you're not welcome here today, Rebecca said, and somehow her gentle tone made it infinitely worse than if she had shouted. I only invited my mother-in-law. I think it would be best if you left. Those words echoed in my head like a death sentence. You're not welcome here. I only invited my mother-in-law. I stood there for another moment, searching my daughter's face for any sign that she might reconsider, that she would smile and admit this was some terrible joke, that she would invite me inside and tell me how much she'd missed me. But she didn't. She simply stood there with her arms crossed, waiting impatiently for me to leave. I made your favorite pie, I said pathetically, holding up the carrier one last time. I'm sure it's lovely, Rebecca replied without even glancing at it. Maybe you can enjoy it at home. At home. Alone in my quiet house with no laughter, no children, no family, just me and a pie made for people who didn't want me. I turned without another word and walked back down those porch steps, each one feeling like a nail in the coffin of our relationship. Behind me, I heard the front door open and close again, the lock clicking decisively into place. Within moments, the sounds of the party resumed as if nothing had happened. My absence hadn't even created a ripple in their perfect celebration. The 4-block walk back to my car like a death march. I clutched the pie carrier while other families waved cheerfully from their driveways, assuming I was heading to my own festive gathering. I waved back automatically, arranging my face into what I hoped looked like a normal expression, while my heart shattered into a million pieces. It wasn't until I was sitting in my car with the engine running and air conditioning blasting that I allowed myself to fully absorb what had just occurred. My daughter, my only child, the center of my world for 42 years, had just told me I wasn't welcome in her home. She had chosen her mother-in-law over me, selected a woman who had never shown me anything but contempt. I sat there for a long time, staring at the pie on my passenger seat that would never be eaten by the people it was made for. Through my windshield, I watched other families enjoying their celebrations, and I felt like I was observing them through bulletproof glass, forever separated from a world where I no longer belonged. That moment marked the death of Catherine Morrison, the peacekeeper, the woman who always swallowed her hurt to avoid conflict, who bent over backward to maintain relationships that clearly weren't reciprocated. That scorching afternoon on Rebecca's porch was when the old Catherine began to die, and something entirely new started taking her place. Something harder, smarter, and completely finished with being discarded. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been excluded from your own family traditions? And don't forget to subscribe because this story is just getting started, and you won't believe what Catherine does next. I don't remember the drive home that day. One moment I was sitting outside Rebecca's neighborhood staring at a pie made with love for people who had rejected both it and me. And the next I was in my own driveway with the engine off and silence pressing against my eardrums like a physical weight. My house felt different when I walked inside. Smaller, shabbier, more pathetic compared to Rebecca's sprawling showcase home. The contrast had never escaped my notice during my visits, but for the first time, instead of feeling inadequate about my modest 3-bedroom ranch, I felt furious. I had purchased this house 35 years ago with my late husband David when Rebecca was 7 years old. We had scraped together every penny for the down payment, choosing this neighborhood specifically because it had excellent schools and safe streets where children could ride bicycles and play until dark. We had painted every single room ourselves, installed hardwood floors during weekends, and planted the garden that still bloomed magnificently every spring. This house had been filled with pure love. Birthday parties with homemade cakes, Christmas mornings with presents piled under a tree we cut ourselves, homework sessions at the kitchen table, and bedtime stories read in cozy bedrooms. Rebecca had taken her first steps on these floors, learned to ride a bike in this driveway, brought her prom date to this living room for photographs. Now she looked at it like it was beneath her dignity, as if the life David and I had built here wasn't sophisticated enough for her new world of granite countertops and designer furniture. I placed the rejected pie on my kitchen counter and stared at it helplessly. What was I supposed to do with a dessert designed to feed 8 people when I would be eating alone? The irony was devastating. I had spent hours creating something beautiful and delicious for people who wouldn't even allow me through their front door. I was still standing there when my phone buzzed with a text message from Rebecca. "Mom, I hope you understand this wasn't personal. Maybe we can have lunch next week." Lunch next week. As if she could erase the humiliation, the rejection, the casual cruelty of what had just happened with an offer to meet at some restaurant where she could check her phone and cut our visit short whenever it became inconvenient. I stared at that message for what felt like hours. The old Catherine would have responded immediately, would have thanked her for the olive branch, and pretended everything was perfectly fine. The old Catherine would have swallowed her devastating hurt and tried desperately to repair a relationship that was apparently only valuable when it suited Rebecca's convenience. But something fundamental had shifted inside me during that silent drive home. Maybe it was the accumulated weight of 2 years of loneliness since David's death. Maybe it was the realization of dozens of small slights and dismissals I had ignored in favor of maintaining peace. Or maybe it was simply the shock of being told with perfect clarity that I wasn't wanted by the person I loved most in the entire world. I turned off my phone without responding. That night, I sat at my dining room table with a slice of apple pie and a cup of coffee, and I thought about my life with brutal honesty, perhaps for the first time in years. I was 67 years old. I had been married to a wonderful man for 38 years before losing him to cancer. I had raised a daughter who I believed loved and respected me. I had worked as a pediatric nurse for 42 years, helping thousands of children and their families through medical crises. I had been a devoted wife, a loving mother, a good person, so why did I feel completely disposable? The answer came to me slowly, like puzzle pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. I felt disposable because I had allowed myself to become disposable. I had spent so many years putting everyone else's needs ahead of my own that I had forgotten I had needs too. I had been so desperate to avoid conflict, so determined to be the easy mother and convenient mother-in-law, that I had taught my family they could treat me however they wanted without facing any consequences whatsoever. When had Rebecca stopped calling just to talk? When had she stopped asking for my advice or my help? When had I become someone she saw out of obligation rather than genuine desire? I realized it had been happening gradually, so slowly I hadn't noticed until it was too late. After David died, Rebecca had been supportive initially, calling regularly and including me in family events. But as time passed and I started healing from my grief, her attention had shifted back to her own busy life. The calls became shorter and less frequent. The invitations came with caveats. If you're feeling up to it, or no pressure if you can't make it. I had interpreted this as sensitivity to my grieving process, but now I wondered if it was something else entirely. Had Rebecca grown tired of dealing with my sadness? Had she found it easier to focus on Michael's family, who were all alive and present and able to contribute to her social status in ways I apparently couldn't? Michael's mother, Patricia, was undeniably a force of nature. A wealthy widow who traveled extensively, wore designer clothing, and maintained the kind of sophisticated social connections that opened doors in Michael's business world. She could afford expensive gifts for the grandchildren, could host elaborate dinner parties, could be a genuine asset to their carefully curated image of success and prosperity. What could I possibly offer that compared to that? A modest pension, homemade pies, and stories about the old days that probably bored them senseless. The realization was devastating, but clarifying. I had allowed myself to become someone who could be easily replaced because I brought nothing unique or valuable to their lives anymore. I was just the mother, expected to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. Well, I thought grimly, taking another bite of my perfect pie, maybe it was time to change that dynamic completely. Over the next 3 days, my phone rang 11 times. Rebecca called 6 times, Michael called twice, and even Patricia called once, though I suspected that was Rebecca's desperate idea. I didn't answer any of the calls. I also received 14 text messages, starting with Rebecca's fake, casual, "hope you're okay," and escalating to Michael's more direct, "Catherine, please call us back. Rebecca is worried sick." I wasn't ready to talk to them yet. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out exactly how I wanted to handle this new reality that had been so brutally revealed. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took care of myself completely. I went to my favorite restaurant and ordered exactly what I wanted without worrying about whether it was too expensive. I bought new sheets for my bed, the luxurious Egyptian cotton ones I'd always admired but never splurged on. I called my old friend Linda from the hospital and made plans for lunch. Most importantly, I went to see my lawyer. Robert Sterling had handled David's will and estate planning, and I trusted him implicitly. He was about my age with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach that I appreciated deeply. When I called his office requesting an emergency appointment, he fit me in the very next morning. "Catherine," he said warmly, rising from behind his mahogany desk to greet me. "I haven't seen you since we finalized David's estate. How are you holding up?" "Better than fine, actually, Robert. I need to make some significant changes to my will." His eyebrows rose slightly with concern. "Of course. What kind of changes are we discussing?" I settled into the leather chair across from his desk and folded my hands in my lap. "I need to understand exactly what assets I have, and I need to explore my options for leaving them to someone other than Rebecca." Robert's expression grew serious. "Catherine, that's a major decision. Has something happened between you and your daughter?" "You could say that." I told him the entire story of July 4th, watching his face grow increasingly grave as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair with a heavy sigh. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," he said simply. "That must have been absolutely devastating." "It was enlightening," I corrected firmly, "and now I need to understand where I stand financially." We spent the next hour meticulously reviewing my assets. What I discovered shocked me completely. Between David's substantial life insurance policy, his pension, my retirement savings, and the house that had appreciated dramatically over the years, I was worth significantly more than I had ever realized. Just over $1.4 million. "Does Rebecca know about this?" Robert asked carefully. "She knows there's an inheritance coming eventually, but we've never discussed specific amounts. I think she assumes it's mostly just the house and a small savings account." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "And currently, everything goes directly to her?" "Everything. She's my only child, my only heir." I met his eyes directly. "But Robert, I don't want someone who doesn't value me to benefit from my death. I want to leave my money to people and causes that actually matter, to ensure my legacy means something positive." "I understand completely. But Catherine, this is an enormous decision. Maybe you should give it some time. See if the situation with Rebecca improves?" "No," I said firmly. "I've given enough time to trying to maintain a relationship that only exists when it's convenient for her. I'm finished begging for scraps of affection from my own daughter." Robert studied me carefully. "What did you have in mind?" "I want to establish a charitable foundation, something that will help other women who've been discarded by their families. Or maybe something specifically for elderly people who've been abandoned by their children. I want to make sure the money goes to people who will use it to help others, not to buy bigger houses and more expensive cars." "That's incredibly generous, Catherine. And what about Rebecca?" I thought about this carefully. "Leave her something small, maybe $15,000. Enough that she can't contest the will for being completely excluded, but not enough to matter to someone with her lifestyle. Robert made detailed notes, then looked up at me again. Are you absolutely certain about this? Once I draw up these documents and you sign them. I'm sure, I said, more confident than I'd been about anything in a long time. As I drove home from the lawyer's office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine power. Not the petty kind that comes from being cruel or manipulative, but the deep, satisfying power that comes from taking complete control of your own life and destiny. Rebecca thought she could discard me without consequences, that I would continue being the grateful, needy mother who was thankful for whatever attention she chose to give. She thought I would swallow this latest humiliation like I had swallowed all the others, that I would eventually come crawling back apologizing for some imaginary offense and begging to be included again. She was catastrophically wrong. That evening, I finally turned my phone back on. There were 23 missed calls and 31 text messages. I scrolled through them all, noting the progression from casual concern to mounting panic. The most recent message, sent just an hour ago, was from Michael. Catherine, we're coming over if we don't hear from you by tonight. Rebecca is convinced something terrible has happened. I smiled as I typed my response. I'm fine, just busy. Talk soon. Short, casual, revealing absolutely nothing. Let them wonder and worry. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and started researching charitable organizations online. If I was going to give away $1.4 million, I wanted to make sure every penny went to the right places. This was just the beginning. Drop a comment if you think Catherine is handling this the right way, and make sure you're subscribed because the revenge that's coming will blow your mind. 2 weeks passed before Rebecca finally cornered me, and I had been strategic in my avoidance every single day. I responded to her texts just often enough to prove I was alive and functional, but never agreed to meet or have any real conversation. I knew this calculated silence was driving her absolutely crazy, and I was savoring every minute of it. The old Catherine would have felt guilty about causing her daughter distress. The new Catherine understood that sometimes people needed to experience uncomfortable consequences for their actions. Rebecca ambushed me at the grocery store on a Thursday morning. I was comparing prices on coffee beans when I heard her voice behind me, tight with frustration and barely controlled panic. Mom, what the hell is going on? I turned slowly, completely unsurprised to see her standing there with her designer handbag and perfectly coordinated outfit. She looked like she hadn't slept well in days, and there was a tightness around her eyes that told me my silence had been having exactly the desired effect. Hello, Rebecca, I said calmly, returning to my coffee selection. How are you? How am I? Her voice was getting louder, drawing stares from other shoppers. I've been worried sick about you for 2 weeks. You disappeared completely. You won't return my calls. You won't see me. What is wrong with you? I selected a bag of medium roast and placed it carefully in my cart. Nothing's wrong with me. I've just been busy. Busy doing what? You're retired. The dismissive way she said it, as if retirement meant my life was empty and meaningless, confirmed everything I'd been thinking about her attitude toward me. I'm starting a foundation, I said simply. Rebecca blinked in confusion. A what? A charitable foundation. I'm calling it the Forgotten Mothers Foundation. It will provide support and resources for elderly women who've been abandoned or neglected by their families. That's... Rebecca struggled for words. That's nice, Mom, but what does that have to do with you ignoring your own family? I turned to face her fully. Tell me, Rebecca, when was the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask for babysitting or to inform me about some schedule change, but just to see how I was doing. We talk all the time. When was the last time you invited me to something without me having to ask? When was the last time you included me in a family decision or asked for my opinion on something important? Rebecca's mouth opened and closed helplessly. Around us, other shoppers were starting to stare openly, but I didn't care anymore about making a scene. And when, I continued, my voice growing stronger, was the last time you chose me over someone else's comfort? Mom, this is about the 4th of July thing, isn't it? I told you that wasn't personal. Wasn't personal? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. You replaced me with Patricia at my own family celebration. You told me I wasn't welcome in my own daughter's home. Patricia needed support. She's going through a divorce. And what about what I needed? The words came out louder than I intended, but I didn't lower my voice. What about the fact that I've been a widow for 2 years and might need support too? What about the fact that I'm your mother, not some distant relative you can discard when someone more interesting comes along? Rebecca's face flushed red. You're being dramatic. It was one party. No, Rebecca, it wasn't one party. It was a pattern. It was the culmination of 2 years of you slowly pushing me out of your life. It was the final proof that I'm only valuable to you when I'm useful, and the moment I require effort or consideration, you'll choose someone else. I started to push my cart away, but Rebecca grabbed my arm desperately. Wait, Mom, please. Can we go somewhere and talk about this? Really talk? I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up at her face. For a moment I saw my little girl there, the child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who used to beg me to read just one more story before bedtime. But then I remembered her standing on her porch 2 weeks ago, telling me I wasn't welcome, and my heart hardened again. I don't think there's anything to talk about, I said gently. You made your choice very clear. But I love you. The words hung in the air between us. I studied her face, seeing the panic there, the sudden understanding that something had fundamentally changed between us. Do you? I asked quietly. Or do you love the idea of me, the convenient mother who shows up when invited, brings homemade food, babysits when needed, and never complains when she's excluded or dismissed? That's not. Rebecca started, but I cut her off. Because I don't think you love me, Rebecca. I think you love having a mother who makes you feel good about yourself without requiring any real effort or sacrifice on your part. And the moment I needed something from you, just basic respect and inclusion, you chose someone else. I pulled my arm free from her grip and started walking again. This time, she didn't follow, but I heard her call out quietly, Mom, please don't do this. I pretended I didn't hear. That afternoon, I had lunch with my friend Linda at our favorite cafe downtown. Linda had been my closest friend for 18 years, ever since we worked together in the pediatric unit at the hospital. She was one of the few people who knew the whole story about July 4th, and she had been watching my transformation with a mixture of concern and admiration. You look different, she said as we settled into our usual table by the window. Different how? Stronger. More present, like you've been sleepwalking for years and finally woke up. I considered this carefully. Maybe I have been sleepwalking. Maybe I've been so focused on maintaining relationships that I forgot to pay attention to whether those relationships were actually worth maintaining. Linda stirred her iced tea thoughtfully. So what's next? Are you really going through with this foundation idea? Absolutely. I've already met with Robert Sterling about setting up the legal structure, and I've been researching existing organizations to see where the biggest need is. And Rebecca? What about Rebecca? Catherine, she's your daughter, your only child. Are you really going to throw away 42 years of relationship over one incident? I set down my sandwich and looked at Linda directly. It wasn't one incident, Linda. It was the final incident in a long series of incidents that I kept ignoring and excusing. And I'm not throwing away the relationship. She already did that when she decided I was replaceable. But maybe if you just talked to her. I tried talking to her at the grocery store this morning. She still doesn't understand what she did wrong. She keeps calling it one party, as if the humiliation and rejection were minor inconveniences I should just get over. Linda was quiet for a moment. So you're really going to cut her off completely? I'm not cutting her off. I'm just stopping my desperate pursuit of someone who's made it clear they don't want to be caught. If Rebecca wants a relationship with me, she can put in the effort to build one. Real effort, not just the occasional lunch invitation when her guilt gets too overwhelming. And if she doesn't, I shrugged, then I'll know where I really stand, won't I? And I'll be able to move on with my life accordingly. We finished lunch and Linda walked me to my car. Before I got in, she hugged me tightly. I hope you know what you're doing, she said. For the first time in years, I do. That evening, I spread all my research across my dining room table and began seriously planning the Forgotten Mothers Foundation. I had identified 3 main areas of focus: emergency financial assistance for elderly women who had been cut off from family support, counseling and social services for women dealing with family estrangement, and legal aid for those facing elder abuse or abandonment. The more I researched, the more I realized how tragically common my situation was. Thousands of elderly women found themselves isolated and discarded by children who had grown too busy, too important, or too focused on their own families to maintain relationships with their aging parents. Many of these women suffered in complete silence, too proud or too ashamed to admit that their own children didn't want them around. But what if there was a place they could turn? What if there were resources available to help them rebuild their lives, find new communities, discover new purposes? What if they didn't have to suffer alone? I was so absorbed in my planning that I almost missed the knock on my front door. When I answered it, I found Michael standing on my porch holding a small bouquet of flowers from the grocery store. "Hi, Catherine," he said, offering me his most charming smile. "Can I come in?" I considered this. Michael was Rebecca's husband, but he had always been kind to me, and I was curious about what approach they had decided to take. "Of course," I said, stepping aside to let him enter. He followed me to the living room where I had been working. His eyes immediately went to the papers spread across my coffee table. Printouts about elder abuse, articles about family estrangement, information about setting up charitable foundations. "Wow," he said, settling onto my couch. "Rebecca mentioned you were starting some kind of charity work. This looks serious." "It is serious," I said, not bothering to gather up the papers. "There's a real need for services supporting elderly women who've been abandoned by their families." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Catherine, about the 4th of July thing, I want you to know that wasn't my idea. Patricia really has been having a hard time with the divorce, and she specifically asked if she could join us. Rebecca thought it would be easier if it was just the one grandmother instead of both," I finished. "I understand, Michael. One is tidier than two, less complicated. It wasn't about choosing sides, wasn't it?" I met his eyes directly, because from where I sat, or rather, from where I didn't sit, it looked exactly like choosing sides. Michael ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Catherine, I'm not great at this family stuff. I leave most of the social planning to Rebecca, but I know she feels terrible about how things went, and I know she misses you." "Does she?" "Yes, she's been a wreck for the past 2 weeks. She keeps saying she's ruined everything, that she doesn't know how to fix it." "Love, and what do you think she should do to fix it?" Michael looked confused. "Apologize, explain why it happened, make sure it doesn't happen again." She already tried explaining. Apparently, I misunderstood her invitation. Traditions change, and Patricia needed support more than I did. "Catherine," Michael leaned forward earnestly, "what would it take for you to forgive her? I mean, what does Rebecca need to do?" The question hung in the air between us. It was a good question, an important question. And I realized that, until this moment, I hadn't really thought about the answer. "I don't know if forgiveness is the right word," I said slowly. "What Rebecca did wasn't just a mistake or a moment of poor judgment. It was a choice that revealed how she really sees me, how little she values our relationship. You can't apologize your way out of that kind of fundamental disrespect. But if she really tried to change, if she made an effort to include you more." "Michael, how long do you think that would last? How long before she got busy again? Before including me became inconvenient again? Before she decided that someone else's needs were more important than mine?" He didn't have an answer for that. "The truth is," I continued, "Rebecca only wants to repair our relationship now because she's uncomfortable with the consequences of her choice. She doesn't like feeling guilty, and she doesn't like having people know that she rejected her own mother. But she hasn't shown any real understanding of what she did wrong, and she certainly hasn't shown any commitment to doing better." Michael stood up to leave, but paused at the door. "Catherine, I hope you'll reconsider. Family is important." "Yes," I said simply, "it is. That's why what Rebecca did was so devastating." After Michael left, I returned to my research with renewed purpose. If my own family didn't value me, then I would create value for other families in similar situations. The Forgotten Mothers Foundation would be my legacy. my contribution to a world that too often discarded its elderly women like yesterday's newspapers. I worked late into the night, outlining programs and services, calculating budgets, and drafting mission statements. For the first time in 2 years, I felt energized, purposeful, excited about the future. But the best part was knowing that Rebecca had no idea what was coming. Tell me in the comments if you've ever felt like Catherine, like you're only valued when you're convenient. And hit that subscribe button because what Catherine does next will shock you. 3 weeks after Michael's visit, Rebecca showed up at my house unannounced on a Saturday morning. I was in my garden deadheading roses and enjoying the quiet satisfaction of tending to something beautiful when I heard her car in the driveway. I didn't get up immediately. Instead, I continued my gardening, letting her wait on the front porch for several minutes before finally making my way to the door. When I opened it, she was holding a large coffee cup from my favorite cafe and wearing the kind of determined expression I remembered from her teenage years when she wanted something desperately. "Mom, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "About what?" "About this foundation thing you're planning. About what happened on the 4th. About us." I considered this. We were going to have this conversation eventually, and I was curious to see what approach she had decided to take. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Rebecca followed me to the living room where my foundation research was still spread across the coffee table. She sat down and stared at the papers with growing alarm. "Mom, what is all this?" "Exactly what I told you. Research for the Forgotten Mothers Foundation." She picked up one of the articles about elder abuse and scanned it quickly. This is about abandoned elderly people, specifically elderly women who've been discarded by their families. Women whose children have decided they're too inconvenient, too needy, or too embarrassing to maintain relationships with. "That's right." Rebecca's face went pale. "Mom, you can't seriously be comparing our situation to elder abuse." "Can't I? What would you call it when an adult child systematically excludes their aging parent from family gatherings, refuses to include them in important decisions, and treats them like an obligation rather than a loved family member?" "I never..." Rebecca started, then stopped. "You never what, Rebecca? Never excluded me? Never made me feel unwanted? Never chose someone else's comfort over mine?" Rebecca sat down heavily on the couch. "This is about more than just the 4th of July, isn't it?" "Finally," I said, settling into my favorite armchair. "Yes, Rebecca. This is about more than just one party. This is about 2 years of feeling like a stranger in my own family. This is about being treated like a guest who's overstayed her welcome instead of like your mother. I didn't realize you felt that way." "Didn't you? Or did you just not care enough to pay attention?" Rebecca flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my life, Rebecca? Not my health, not whether I was getting out enough, but about my thoughts, my feelings, my dreams, my goals. When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of like a problem to be managed?" I don't know. I've been so busy with work and the kids. Everyone's busy, Rebecca, but people make time for what matters to them, and clearly I don't matter enough for you to make time." We sat in silence for several minutes. Rebecca stared at the foundation research, her face cycling through various emotions. Guilt, anger, confusion, and something that might have been fear. "Mom," she said finally, "what do you want from me? What would it take to fix this?" "I don't think it can be fixed," I said quietly. "I think this is just who you are now, and I need to accept that and move on with my life accordingly." "But I love you. Do you? Or do you love the idea of me? The fantasy of being a good daughter who has a close relationship with her mother?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Of course I love you. You're my mother. Loving someone and valuing them are two different things, Rebecca. You might love me in the abstract, but you don't value my presence in your life. You don't prioritize our relationship. You don't make sacrifices for it. And when push comes to shove, you'll choose almost anyone else over me." "That's not true, isn't it? Let me ask you something, Rebecca. If Patricia Fletcher needed a place to stay for a few months, would you invite her to live with you?" Maybe. She's family." "And if I needed a place to stay for a few months?" Rebecca hesitated just long enough to prove my point. "That's different. You have your own house." But if I didn't, if I lost this house somehow and needed help, would you invite me to live with you? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. We don't have a lot of space, Rebecca finally said. Patricia would fit in that space, but I wouldn't. Mom, that's a hypothetical situation. No, Rebecca, it's a values clarification. It's a way of understanding who matters to you and who doesn't, and your answer tells me everything I need to know. Rebecca stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're creating problems where none exist. You're acting like I've abandoned you when I talk to you every week. You talk at me every week. You call to tell me about your schedule changes, or to ask me to babysit, or to update me on the children's activities, but you don't actually talk to me. You don't ask my opinion about things that matter. You don't include me in your real life. Rebecca's voice was getting louder. What do you want? Do you want me to call you every day? Do you want me to ask your permission before I make plans? Do you want me to run my entire life by you first? I want you to want me in your life, I said simply. Not because you feel obligated, not because it's expected, but because you actually enjoy my company and value my presence. But I don't think you do, and I don't think you ever will. Rebecca stared at me for a long moment. So what does that mean? Are you cutting me off? Disowning me? I'm not cutting you off, Rebecca. I'm just stopping my desperate pursuit of someone who obviously doesn't want to be caught. I'm stopping pretending that we have a close relationship when we clearly don't. But the foundation, all this research about abandoned elderly women, you're making yourself into a victim. No, I said, standing up to face her. I'm making myself into a solution. If my own family doesn't value me, then I'll use my time and resources to help other women in similar situations. I'll create something meaningful with my life instead of waiting around for crumbs of affection from people who can't be bothered to show up for me. Rebecca's face crumpled. Mom, please. I know I screwed up with the 4th of July thing, but can't we move past this? Can't we start over? Can we? Are you actually willing to change how you treat me, or are you just uncomfortable with the consequences of treating me poorly? I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to say that you understand what you did wrong. I want you to say that you're willing to prioritize our relationship, not just when it's convenient, but even when it requires effort or sacrifice. I want you to say that you value me enough to choose me sometimes, even when there are other options. Rebecca was crying now. I do value you. I do want you in my life. Then prove it. How? I walked to my desk and pulled out a calendar. Your birthday is next month. How are you celebrating? Michael's planning something. I don't know the details yet. And am I invited? Rebecca hesitated. I assume so. You assume, or you've specifically asked Michael to include me? I haven't really thought about it. There it is, I said softly. You haven't thought about it. Your birthday celebration. And you haven't thought about whether your own mother will be included. That tells me everything I need to know about how important I am to you. I walked back to my chair and sat down. Here's what I want, Rebecca. I want you to go home and really think about what kind of relationship you want to have with me. Not what you think you should want. Not what looks good to other people, but what you actually want. And if you decide you want a real relationship, one where I'm included in your life, where my feelings matter, where you make an effort to spend time with me because you enjoy my company, then we can talk. And if I don't, then you can continue living your life exactly as you have been, and I'll continue building mine without you in it. Rebecca gathered her things and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. Mom, what about the kids? Sophie and Oliver love you. You can't punish them for my mistakes. For the first time in our conversation, I felt my composure crack slightly. Do they love me, Rebecca? Or have you taught them to see me the same way you do, as an obligation, a duty visit, someone to be endured rather than enjoyed? That's not. They do love you. When was the last time either of them asked to see me? When was the last time they called me just to talk? When was the last time they seemed genuinely excited to spend time with me rather than just politely tolerant? Rebecca's face answered the question before her words could. I'm not punishing the children, I continued. But I'm also not going to use them as an excuse to accept a relationship with you that's one-sided and disrespectful. If you want me to be part of their lives, then you need to value me enough to make me a real part of yours. After Rebecca left, I sat in my quiet house and cried. Not because I was sad, though I was, but because I was grieving. I was grieving the daughter I thought I had raised, the relationship I thought we shared, and the family I thought I belonged to. But when the tears stopped, I felt something else. Relief. I had said everything I needed to say. I had laid out my terms clearly and honestly. Now it was up to Rebecca to decide what she wanted to do with that information. In the meantime, I had a foundation to build. That afternoon, I called Robert Sterling to schedule another appointment. It was time to finalize my new will and make my values concrete and legal. If Rebecca wanted to prove that she valued me, she would have to do it soon, because I was done waiting for someone to choose me. Comment below if you think Catherine is being too harsh, or if Rebecca deserves everything that's coming. And make sure you subscribe, because this story is about to take a turn that will leave you speechless. 6 weeks passed without a single word from Rebecca. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits. The silence was deafening, but it was also clarifying. Her absence told me everything I needed to know about her priorities and her commitment to change. During those 6 weeks, I threw myself completely into building the Forgotten Mothers Foundation. I met with lawyers, accountants, and nonprofit specialists. I researched facilities and programs, interviewed potential staff members, and began developing partnerships with existing elder services organizations. Most importantly, I finalized my new will. Robert Sterling had done exactly what I'd asked. The bulk of my estate, over $1.2 million, would fund the foundation, with smaller donations going to various charities I'd supported over the years. Rebecca would receive $15,000, enough to prevent her from contesting the will, but a fraction of what she'd been expecting. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Robert asked as I signed the final documents. "This represents a significant change from your previous will." "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied, my signature steady and sure. The foundation was scheduled to launch officially in 3 months, and I had already begun preliminary outreach to identify potential recipients of our services. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of women reached out, sharing stories of abandonment, neglect, and family estrangement that mirrored my own experience. One letter particularly stood out, from a 74-year-old woman named Margaret, whose 3 adult children had gradually excluded her from their lives after she remarried following her husband's death. They didn't approve of her new husband and had essentially written her off rather than accept her happiness. Margaret had been living in virtual isolation for 2 years, too proud to admit to friends that her own children had rejected her. "I thought I was the only one," she wrote. "I thought there was something wrong with me, something I had done to deserve this treatment. Reading about your foundation made me realize that this happens to more women than we want to admit. Thank you for giving us a voice." I was reading Margaret's letter for the 3rd time when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Sophie and Oliver standing on my porch, looking uncertain and a little nervous. My heart clenched. I hadn't seen my grandchildren in almost 2 months, and they seemed to have grown taller in that short time. I opened the door to find them standing alone, no Rebecca or Michael in sight. "Grandma Catherine!" Oliver launched himself at me, wrapping his 8-year-old arms around my waist. Sophie, more reserved at 10, hung back slightly, but offered a tentative smile. "What are you two doing here?" I asked, looking past them toward the street. "Where are your parents?" "Mom dropped us off," Sophie said. "She said we could visit for an hour while she runs errands." Dropped them off like I was a babysitting service rather than their grandmother. But I pushed down my irritation and focused on the children, who certainly weren't to blame for their mother's poor judgment. "Well, come in then," I said, stepping aside. "Are you hungry? I think I have some cookies in the kitchen." We spent the next hour in my backyard, where Oliver examined my tomato plants with intense curiosity, and Sophie helped me deadhead flowers in the garden. They chattered about school, friends, and summer activities, filling my quiet house with the kind of energy I hadn't realized I'd been missing. But as the hour drew to a close, Sophie grew quiet. She was sitting on my back steps, petting the neighbor's cat who had wandered over. Grandma Catherine, she said eventually. Yes, sweetheart? Are you mad at Mom? The question hit me like a physical blow. I sat down beside her on the steps, choosing my words carefully. Why would you ask that? Because you don't come to our house anymore, and Mom gets weird when we ask about you. And Dad told Oliver that grown-ups sometimes have disagreements that are hard to understand. I studied Sophie's face, seeing Rebecca's features, but also her father's thoughtful expression. At 10, she was old enough to sense family tension, but too young to understand its complexities. I'm not mad at your mom, I said carefully. But sometimes grown-ups have different ideas about what relationships should look like, and that can make things complicated. Do you not want to see us anymore? The question broke my heart. Oh, honey, I always want to see you. You and Oliver are two of my most favorite people in the whole world. Then why don't you come over? How do you explain to a 10-year-old that their mother has made it clear you're not welcome? How do you tell them that you've been systematically excluded from their lives without making them feel caught in the middle? Sometimes, I said slowly, when grown-ups disagree about important things, they need some time apart to figure things out. That doesn't mean they don't love each other, and it definitely doesn't mean they don't love you. Sophie nodded solemnly, processing this information. Will you figure it out soon? I hope so, sweetheart. But in the meantime, you can always call me if you want to talk, okay? And maybe sometimes we can do things just the three of us, like today. Okay? When Rebecca came to pick them up, she barely made eye contact with me. She stood at the end of my driveway, engine running, while the children gathered their things and said goodbye. Thanks for watching them, she called out, her voice carefully neutral. I wasn't watching them, I replied. I was visiting with them. There's a difference. Rebecca's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. The children climbed into her car, waving enthusiastically as they drove away. That evening, I sat in my quiet house and thought about Sophie's questions. Was I being unfair to the children by maintaining my distance from Rebecca? Was I punishing them for their mother's mistakes? But then I thought about Margaret's letter, about the dozens of other women who had reached out to share their stories of family abandonment. I thought about all the grandmothers who had been discarded, all the mothers who had been deemed inconvenient, all the women who had spent their final years wondering what they had done wrong to deserve such treatment. I couldn't save my relationship with Rebecca. She had made her choices clear through her actions and her silence. But I could use my pain to help other women avoid the same fate. I could create something meaningful from my heartbreak. 2 days later, I received an unexpected call from Michael. Catherine, he said, his voice strained. We need to talk. About what? About Rebecca's birthday party next weekend. She didn't invite you. I assumed as much. Catherine, this is killing her. She's been miserable for weeks, but she's too proud to admit she was wrong. And now she's planning this big party, and everyone's going to notice that you're not there. Everyone meaning who? Her friends, our neighbors, my family. People are going to ask where you are. I almost smiled. And what is Rebecca planning to tell them? Michael was quiet for a moment. I don't know. She won't talk about it. Michael, let me ask you something. Did Rebecca specifically decide not to invite me, or did she simply not think to include me? Another pause. I think she just assumed you wouldn't want to come, given everything that's happened. She assumed. Just like she assumed I would understand about the 4th of July. Just like she assumes I'll always be available when she needs something, but never considers whether I might need something from her. Catherine, please come to the party. Don't let this destroy your relationship with your daughter. Michael, my relationship with my daughter was destroyed the day she told me I wasn't welcome in her home. Everything since then has just been me learning to accept that reality. After I hung up, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I was going to attend Rebecca's birthday party after all, but not as the desperate mother begging for scraps of attention. I was going as Catherine Morrison, founder of the Forgotten Mothers Foundation, a woman who had built something meaningful from her pain and refused to be erased without consequence. Rebecca wanted to pretend I didn't exist? Perfect. It was time to remind her exactly who she was trying to erase. Drop a heart in the comments if you can't wait to see what Catherine does at that party, and smash that subscribe button, because what happens next will shock you to your core. Rebecca's birthday party was scheduled for Saturday evening at their house, the same house where I'd been turned away on July 4th. I spent the week carefully planning my appearance, not out of spite, but out of strategy. If I was going to crash my own daughter's party, I was going to do it with purpose and dignity. I bought a new dress, elegant but not flashy, expensive but understated. I had my hair done professionally for the first time in months. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a successful, confident woman who had built something meaningful with her life. Most importantly, I prepared business cards for the foundation and a brief informational flyer about our mission and services. If I was going to make an appearance, I might as well make it productive. I arrived at 7:30 p.m. when the party would be in full swing, but early enough to make an impact. Cars lined the street just as they had on July 4th, and I could hear laughter and conversation floating from the backyard. This time, however, I wasn't carrying a homemade pie and hopes for inclusion. This time, I was carrying the tools to build my own future. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell, my heart steady and my purpose clear. Michael answered, and his face went through a series of expressions: surprise, panic, and something that might have been relief. "Catherine, you came." "Hello, Michael. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." No, of course not. Come in, please. Rebecca will be so happy to see you." I doubted that, but I followed him through the house toward the back patio. The party was exactly what I'd expected. About 30 people, mostly Rebecca's work colleagues and Michael's business associates, along with a handful of neighbors and family friends. The kind of social gathering designed to reinforce their image as successful, sophisticated suburbanites. The moment I stepped onto the patio, conversation paused. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed several people glance in my direction with curiosity. Rebecca was standing near the bar, looking stunning in a red cocktail dress, holding court with a group of women I didn't recognize. When she saw me, her face went completely white. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the patio. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how to handle my unexpected appearance without making a scene in front of her guests. I didn't give her the chance to decide. "Rebecca," I said, walking directly over to her group. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." "Mom," she said, her voice carefully controlled. I didn't know you were coming. I wouldn't miss my daughter's birthday," I replied smoothly, embracing her in a hug that probably looked affectionate to observers, but felt stiff and awkward to both of us. The women Rebecca had been talking to watched our interaction with interest. I could see them trying to figure out why there was tension between a mother and daughter at a birthday party. "Everyone," Rebecca said, her hostess training kicking in, "this is my mother, Catherine Morrison." "Catherine!" One of the women, a perfectly coiffed blonde in designer clothes, stepped forward with an enthusiastic smile. "I'm Amanda Richardson, Rebecca's colleague. We've heard so much about you." "Have you?" I replied, genuinely curious about what Rebecca had told them. "Oh yes, Rebecca talks about you all the time. She's always mentioning your phone calls and visits. You two must be very close." I glanced at Rebecca, whose face had somehow gone even paler. "We talk regularly," I said diplomatically. "And Rebecca mentioned you're starting some kind of charity work?" Another woman chimed in. "How wonderful." "Yes, I'm founding a nonprofit organization called the Forgotten Mothers Foundation. We provide support services for elderly women who've been abandoned or neglected by their families." The group fell silent. I could see them processing this information, trying to reconcile Rebecca's claims about our close relationship with the mission of an organization dedicated to helping abandoned mothers. How interesting," Amanda said carefully. "What inspired you to focus on that particular cause?" "Personal experience," I replied simply. "I've learned that far too many older women find themselves discarded by children who are too busy, too important, or too focused on their own lives to maintain meaningful relationships with their aging parents." Rebecca's face was now approaching green. "Mom, maybe we should." "It's actually quite common," I continued, addressing the group, but watching Rebecca out of the corner of my eye. Adult children often start seeing their elderly parents as burdens rather than people deserving of love and respect. They'll exclude them from family gatherings, stop including them in important decisions, and gradually push them out of their lives entirely. "That's terrible," one of the women said, looking genuinely upset. "Who would do such a thing?" "You'd be surprised," I replied. "Some of the most seemingly devoted children can turn remarkably cold when their parents become inconvenient. Take family holidays, for example. It's very common for adult children to simply stop inviting their elderly parents, sometimes preferring to include in-laws or friends instead." The silence was becoming uncomfortable. I could see Rebecca's friends processing the implications of what I was saying, looking back and forth between us with growing understanding. "Ladies," Rebecca said abruptly, "why don't I show you the new renovations we did on the kitchen?" As the group moved away, Rebecca grabbed my arm. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed under her breath. "I'm socializing at my daughter's birthday party," I replied calmly. "Isn't this what you wanted?" "You're making me look like a monster in front of my friends. I'm simply sharing information about my foundation's mission. If that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you should ask yourself why." Rebecca looked around desperately, probably trying to figure out how to get me to leave without creating a bigger scene. But I wasn't done yet. I made my way around the party, introducing myself to people I didn't know and catching up with those I did. With each conversation, I naturally worked in information about the foundation and its mission. I didn't explicitly say that Rebecca had abandoned me, but I didn't have to. The implications were clear enough for anyone paying attention. "Catherine, dear," I turned to find Patricia Whitman approaching with a glass of wine and a predatory smile. "What a surprise to see you here." "Hello, Patricia. You look well. How are you adjusting to single life?" "Oh, wonderfully. It's been so freeing, really. And Rebecca and Michael have been incredibly supportive through the transition. They've really taken me under their wing." "How nice for you," I replied evenly. "It must be comforting to know you have family who value your presence in their lives." Patricia's smile faltered slightly. She was smart enough to catch the subtext. "Well, Rebecca has always been such a devoted daughter-in-law. She really understands the importance of family loyalty." "Does she? That's interesting. I was just telling some of her friends about my new foundation for abandoned elderly women. You should hear some of the stories. Daughters who simply stop including their mothers in family events, who choose other people's comfort over their own parents' feelings. It's really quite heartbreaking." Patricia's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. "That does sound heartbreaking," she said carefully. "Of course, I'm sure you'd never have to worry about such treatment from Michael. He seems like the kind of man who honors his commitments to family." "Yes, he is very devoted," Patricia agreed, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was beginning to understand that her position as the preferred mother figure might not be as secure as she'd assumed. "Excuse me, ladies." Michael appeared beside us, looking stressed. "Catherine, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" I followed him to a quiet corner of the yard, away from the other guests. "Catherine, what's your endgame here?" he asked bluntly. "Are you trying to humiliate Rebecca in front of her friends?" "I'm not trying to humiliate anyone, Michael. I'm simply attending my daughter's birthday party and sharing information about my foundation's work. If that makes Rebecca uncomfortable, maybe she should examine why." "You're making everyone uncomfortable. People are starting to put two and two together." "Are they? And what conclusion are they reaching?" Michael ran his hand through his hair. "That Rebecca treated you badly, that she excluded you from family events, that she's exactly the kind of daughter your foundation was created to help women deal with." "Well," I said calmly, "if the shoe fits." "Catherine, please. Rebecca realizes she made mistakes. She wants to fix things, but she doesn't know how." "Mistakes?" I repeated. "Michael, what Rebecca did wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices that revealed her true feelings about our relationship. And now that those choices are having social consequences, she wants to fix things. She loves you. She loves the idea of being seen as a good daughter more than she actually loves me," I corrected. "If she truly loved me, she would have made different choices long before tonight." Michael looked defeated. So what happens now? Are you going to keep making her look bad in front of everyone she knows? I'm not making Rebecca look like anything, Michael. I'm simply being honest about my experiences and my work. If that reflects poorly on Rebecca, that's because her actions were poor, not because my descriptions of them are unfair. I started to walk away, then turned back. Michael, let me ask you something. If Rebecca really wanted to repair our relationship, if she truly understood what she'd done wrong and was committed to doing better, what do you think she would do right now, tonight, in front of all these people? Michael stared at me, clearly not understanding what I was asking. She would publicly acknowledge what she did wrong, I continued. She would apologize not just to me, but to everyone who's been led to believe we have a close relationship when we don't. She would admit that she's been the kind of daughter my foundation was created to help other mothers deal with. You want her to humiliate herself publicly? I want her to be honest publicly. There's a difference. I rejoined the party, spending another hour making connections and sharing information about the foundation. Several people asked for my business card, genuinely interested in supporting the cause or sharing information with others who might need our services. As I was preparing to leave, Rebecca finally cornered me near the front door. "Are you satisfied?" she asked, her voice tight with anger and tears. "Have you gotten your revenge?" This wasn't about revenge, Rebecca. This was about truth. You've ruined my party. You've made me look terrible in front of all my friends. I've done nothing but tell people about my foundation and its mission. If that made you look terrible, then you already were terrible. I just helped people see it. Rebecca's composure finally cracked. "What do you want from me? Do you want me to grovel? Do you want me to humiliate myself begging for your forgiveness?" "I want you to understand what you did," I said quietly. "I want you to genuinely comprehend that you abandoned your own mother when she needed you most, and that you did it not out of necessity or crisis, but out of convenience and social climbing. I never abandoned you." "You absolutely did. You systematically excluded me from your life. You chose other people over me repeatedly. And when I finally called you on it, you went silent for 6 weeks rather than examine your own behavior. So what now? Are we done? Is this relationship over?" I looked at my daughter, this woman I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and felt something finally settle into place in my chest. "This relationship was over the day you told me I wasn't welcome in your home," I said. "Everything since then has just been me learning to accept that reality." I walked to my car without looking back, leaving Rebecca standing in her doorway, surrounded by the remnants of a party that had revealed more truth than she'd intended. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in months. I had faced my daughter and her social circle with dignity and honesty. I had planted seeds that would grow into conversations and questions Rebecca would have to answer. Most importantly, I had proven to myself that I didn't need her validation or inclusion to be valuable. I was building my own legacy, one that would outlast her rejection and help other women avoid the pain she had caused me. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't hurting Rebecca. It was succeeding without her. If you're loving Catherine's power moves, drop a fire emoji in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed because the phone calls Rebecca makes after this party will blow your mind. The phone started ringing at 8 a.m. the next morning. I ignored the first few calls, but when it became clear that Rebecca was going to keep trying, I finally answered. "What do you want, Rebecca?" "Mom, we need to talk. What you did last night was cruel and manipulative, and I want to understand why you thought it was okay to embarrass me in front of my friends." Her voice was tight with anger, but I could hear something else underneath it. Fear. The party had not gone the way she'd expected after I left. "I didn't embarrass you, Rebecca. I simply told people about my foundation and its mission. If that embarrassed you, then you should examine why." "You know exactly what you did. You made me look like a terrible daughter in front of everyone I know." "Are you a terrible daughter?" The question hung in the air between us. Rebecca's silence was answer enough. "I've been getting texts all morning," she continued finally. "Amanda Richardson wants to know if it's true that I haven't spoken to you in months. Jennifer from Michael's office asked if you're really doing charity work for abandoned mothers because of personal experience." Even Patricia called to ask if there are problems between us. I settled into my kitchen chair with my coffee, genuinely curious about how Rebecca was planning to handle the social fallout from her choices. And what are you telling them? I don't know what to tell them. You've made me look like some kind of monster. I've made you look like exactly what you are, Rebecca, a woman who abandoned her elderly mother when it became socially convenient to do so. I never abandoned you. Didn't you? Let me refresh your memory. You excluded me from your 4th of July celebration in favor of your mother-in-law. When I tried to discuss how that made me feel, you went completely silent for 6 weeks. You didn't invite me to your birthday party. You used me for babysitting but never include me in actual family activities. You've systematically pushed me out of your life, and now you're upset that people know about it. It's more complicated than that. Is it? From where I sit, it seems pretty straightforward. You decided I was less important than other people in your life, and you treated me accordingly. The only thing that's changed is that now other people know how you really feel about your mother. Rebecca was crying now. Mom, please. I know I've made mistakes, but can't we work through this? Can't we find a way to fix our relationship? What kind of relationship do you want to fix, Rebecca? The one where I'm grateful for whatever scraps of attention you decide to throw my way? The one where I pretend not to notice when you exclude me from family events? The one where I smile and say no problem when you choose other people over me? I want us to be close again, Rebecca said through her tears. I want things to go back to how they were before. Before what, Rebecca? Before you showed me who you really are? Before I finally understood how little you value me? There's no going back from that kind of revelation. But I do value you. I love you. You love the idea of me. You love having a mother who makes you feel good about yourself without requiring any real effort or sacrifice. But you don't love me enough to choose me when it's inconvenient. You don't love me enough to prioritize our relationship when other options are available. The silence stretched between us. I could hear Rebecca struggling to find words that would somehow undo months of rejection and neglect. What would it take? She asked finally. What would I need to do to prove that I want you in my life? It was a good question, and I realized I'd been thinking about the answer for weeks. I don't think you can prove it, Rebecca, because I don't think it's true. I think you want the appearance of a good relationship with me more than you want the actual relationship. I think you want people to believe you're a devoted daughter more than you want to actually be one. That's not fair, isn't it? Look at your reaction to last night. You're not upset because you hurt me or because our relationship is damaged. You're upset because other people now know the truth about how you treat me. You're upset about the social consequences, not the emotional ones. Another long silence. So what happens now? Rebecca asked, her voice small. Now you live with the consequences of your choices. Now you explain to your friends why your elderly mother is doing charity work for abandoned women. Now you deal with the fact that people know you're exactly the kind of daughter other mothers need protection from. And us? What happens to us? There is no us, Rebecca. You made that clear months ago. I'm just finally accepting it. I hung up before she could respond. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming, not just from Rebecca, but from Michael, from mutual friends, even from some of the people I'd met at the party. Word was spreading through their social circle, and the story wasn't reflecting well on Rebecca. Amanda Richardson called on Tuesday afternoon. Catherine, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly. I got your number from the Foundation's business card. I've been thinking about our conversation at the party, and I wanted to ask, is Rebecca really the reason you started the Foundation? The Foundation was inspired by my personal experiences, yes. Catherine, I had no idea. Rebecca has always talked about you like you two were very close. She mentions calling you all the time, visiting regularly. Amanda, can I ask you something? In all the times Rebecca has mentioned me, has she ever actually included me in any of the events or gatherings you've been part of? Amanda was quiet for a moment. Now that you mention it, no. I don't think I've ever actually seen you at any of their parties or family events, but she always made it sound like you were so busy, so independent. I see. And did she mention that she uninvited me from their 4th of July barbecue this year? She uninvited you from a family event? She told me I wasn't welcome because she had decided to include Michael's mother instead. Apparently, there wasn't room for both grandmothers at a backyard barbecue. The silence on the other end of the line was telling. Catherine, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Rebecca was capable of. You seem like such a lovely woman, and the work you're doing with the foundation sounds incredible. Thank you, Amanda. The foundation has become very important to me. It's given me a sense of purpose during a difficult time. After we hung up, I realized that this was exactly what Rebecca was afraid of, that people would see through her carefully constructed image to the reality underneath. She had built her social identity partly on being the devoted daughter of a beloved mother, and now that fiction was crumbling. The next call came from Michael's business partner, someone I'd met briefly at the party. Mrs. Morrison, this is David Park. I work with Michael at Hayes Consulting. We met Saturday night at Rebecca's party. Of course, David. How are you? I'm well, thank you. Mrs. Morrison, I hope you don't mind, but I've been thinking about your foundation since we spoke. My mother-in-law has been having some issues with family estrangement, and I wondered if you might have resources that could help. Of course. What kind of situation is she dealing with? Her daughter, my sister-in-law, has essentially cut her out of their lives since she remarried. They don't approve of her new husband, so they've stopped including her in family events, won't let her see the grandchildren unsupervised, that sort of thing. She's been devastated. That's unfortunately very common. We have support groups for women in similar situations, as well as counseling resources and legal advocacy if needed. That would be wonderful. Mrs. Morrison, can I ask, was this foundation really inspired by your own experience with Rebecca? I paused, considering how to answer. The foundation was inspired by my realization that far too many older women suffer in silence when their families abandon them. Many of us blame ourselves, thinking we must have done something wrong to deserve such treatment. But the truth is, some adult children simply choose their own convenience over their parents' well-being. I see. And Rebecca? Rebecca made her choices very clear. I'm simply responding to them accordingly. After David hung up, I realized something important was happening. Rebecca's rejection wasn't just affecting me anymore. It was affecting her reputation, her social standing, her carefully curated image of success and sophistication. People were starting to see her differently, and she was going to have to live with that. But more importantly, my pain was being transformed into purpose. Every conversation about the foundation, every person who reached out for help, every woman who found support through our services, it all represented something meaningful rising from Rebecca's cruelty. Wednesday brought the call I'd been expecting. Catherine, this is Patricia Whitman. I think we need to talk. Hello, Patricia. What can I do for you? I understand there's been some tension between you and Rebecca lately. I wanted to reach out because I'm concerned about how this might be affecting the children. I almost laughed. Patricia, who had gleefully taken my place at family gatherings, was now concerned about family harmony. What specifically concerns you, Patricia? Well, Sophie mentioned that she visited you recently, and she seemed confused about why you don't come to family events anymore. I think it would be better for everyone if we could find a way to resolve this situation. I see. And what resolution did you have in mind? Perhaps you could be more understanding of Rebecca's position. She's been under a lot of stress with work and the children, and Michael's schedule has been demanding. Maybe if you were a bit more flexible about family arrangements. Patricia, let me stop you right there. Are you seriously calling to suggest that I should be more understanding about being excluded from my own family's gatherings? I'm suggesting that sometimes we need to make sacrifices for the greater good of the family. Whose family, Patricia? Because from where I sit, it seems like Rebecca has made it very clear that I'm not part of her family anymore. Patricia's voice hardened. Catherine, I don't think you understand the delicate balance involved in managing family relationships. Sometimes it's better to step back rather than create conflict. You mean, like you stepped back when Rebecca chose to include you instead of me at the 4th of July barbecue? That was different. Was it? How? Patricia struggled for words. Michael and Rebecca felt that I needed the support during my divorce. And what did they feel I needed, Patricia? Support during my widowhood? Inclusion during my grief? Or did they decide that my needs simply didn't matter as much as yours? Catherine, I think you're being dramatic. I think I'm being honest. And I think you're calling because you're starting to realize that your position as the preferred mother figure isn't as secure as you thought. People are asking questions, aren't they, about why Rebecca would choose her mother-in-law over her own mother, about what kind of daughter abandons her elderly parent for social convenience. The silence on the other end told me I'd hit the mark. Patricia, let me give you some advice. The foundation I'm building is going to be very visible in this community. We'll be hosting events, fundraisers, awareness campaigns. The story of why this foundation exists is going to become well known. You might want to consider how you want to be remembered in that story, as the woman who displaced a grieving widow, or as someone who tried to heal a fractured family. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you about consequences, about how choices create legacies, about what happens when people think they can discard others without anyone noticing. I hung up before she could respond. That evening, I sat in my garden with a glass of wine and thought about how much had changed in just a few months. I had gone from being the discarded mother, desperately hoping for inclusion, to being the architect of my own future and the founder of an organization that would help hundreds of women. Rebecca's rejection had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. It had forced me to stop waiting for someone else to value me and start creating value for myself and others. My phone buzzed with a text message from Sophie. "Grandma Catherine, can Oliver and I come visit you this weekend? We miss you." I smiled as I typed my response. "Of course, sweetheart. I miss you too." Some relationships could be salvaged. Some love could survive family dysfunction, but I was done fighting for people who didn't want to be caught. Comment below if you think Patricia got exactly what she deserved, and don't forget to subscribe because the foundation launch is coming and it's going to change everything. 3 months after Rebecca's birthday party, the Forgotten Mothers Foundation officially launched with a community event at the downtown convention center. The response exceeded every expectation I'd had. Over 250 people attended, including several city council members, local business leaders, and dozens of women who needed our services. The event made the front page of the local newspaper with a feature story about the foundation's mission and my personal journey from abandoned mother to advocate. The article was honest about the inspiration for the organization, though I had been careful not to mention Rebecca by name. Local woman turns personal pain into purpose. Read the headline, with a photo of me speaking at the podium. The article described the foundation's services and included quotes from several women who had already benefited from our support groups and counseling services. "I thought I was the only one," said Margaret, the woman whose letter had moved me so deeply. "I thought there was something wrong with me because my own children didn't want me around. Finding this community has saved my life." The article also mentioned our upcoming fundraising gala scheduled for December, an elegant evening designed to raise both money and awareness for our cause. I was reading the newspaper coverage for the 3rd time when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Rebecca standing on my porch, holding what appeared to be the same newspaper. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Congratulations," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "The foundation launch looks like it was very successful." "Thank you, it was." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, can we talk, please? I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and She trailed off, seemingly unable to find the words. "What is it, Rebecca?" "I've been getting questions about the foundation, about the article, about why my mother is running an organization for abandoned elderly women. People are putting 2 and 2 together." "And what are you telling them?" "I don't know what to tell them." Her careful composure cracked slightly. "Amanda Richardson cornered me at the grocery store yesterday, asking if it's true that I excluded you from family events. Jennifer from Michael's office wants to know if you're really doing this work because of personal experience. Even the kids' teachers are asking questions." I studied my daughter's face, seeing the stress and embarrassment there, but also something else, a dawning understanding of consequences. What would you like me to do about that, Rebecca? I don't know. Maybe you could clarify that the foundation isn't really about our situation specifically, but it is about our situation specifically, among others. Mom, please, this is affecting my reputation, Michael's business relationships, even the kids' social situations. Sophie came home from school yesterday, asking why her friend's mother wanted to know if Grandma Catherine was the lady in the newspaper who helps abandoned mothers. For the first time in our conversation, I felt a flicker of sympathy. What did you tell Sophie? I told her it was complicated, but she's not stupid, Mom. She's starting to figure out that something's wrong between us, and she's asking harder questions. I leaned against my doorframe, considering this. What kind of questions? About why you don't come to our house anymore. About why we never include you in family activities. About why I get upset when people mention your foundation. Rebecca's voice was getting smaller. She asked me yesterday if I was a bad daughter. The words hung in the air between us. I could see Rebecca struggling with the weight of them, with the growing realization that her choices had consequences beyond her immediate comfort. What did you tell her? I told her that grown-up relationships are complicated. But Mom, I don't think she believed me, and I don't think I believe myself anymore. Rebecca looked down at the newspaper in her hands. I read the whole article 3 times, and I kept thinking about all the women who shared their stories, about how their children just stopped including them, about how they felt invisible and unwanted, and I realized that's exactly what I did to you. Her voice was barely a whisper. I made you feel invisible. I made you feel unwanted. I chose other people over you, and I convinced myself it was justified because it was easier than examining what kind of person I was becoming. I waited, saying nothing. Mom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I've damaged something between us that might never be repaired. But I need you to know that I understand now what I did. I understand that I abandoned you when you needed me most. And I did it not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Why? Asked quietly. Why did you want to? Rebecca was crying now, but she didn't look away. Because including you felt like work. Because your sadness after Dad died made me uncomfortable. Because Patricia was more fun, more sophisticated, more useful for Michael's career advancement. Because I could take you for granted in a way I couldn't take her for granted. The honesty was brutal and long overdue. Because, she continued, I knew you would always love me no matter how I treated you. So I felt free to treat you however was most convenient for me. And now I realize that love without respect isn't really love at all. Now I understand that taking someone for granted is just another way of saying they don't matter to you. Now I know that I became exactly the kind of daughter your foundation was created to protect other mothers from. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in months. I saw genuine remorse there, real understanding of what she had done and why it was wrong. But I also saw fear, and I suspected that fear was as much about social consequences as it was about our relationship. What do you want from me, Rebecca? I want to deserve your forgiveness someday. I want to learn how to be the daughter you raised me to be instead of the person I became. I want to find a way to repair the damage I've done, if that's even possible. And if it's not possible, Rebecca's face crumpled. Then I'll have to live with the fact that I destroyed the most important relationship in my life because I was too selfish and entitled to value it properly. We stood in silence for several minutes, the weight of months of hurt and anger and disappointment settling between us. Rebecca, I said finally, I appreciate that you're finally understanding what you did wrong, but understanding and changing are two different things. Anyone can feel guilty when the consequences become uncomfortable. The question is whether you're actually capable of sustained change or whether you'll slip back into old patterns once the immediate pressure dies down. How can I prove that I'm serious about changing? I don't know if you can, and I don't know if I'm capable of trusting you enough to give you the chance to try. Rebecca nodded, accepting this. I understand. But Mom, would you consider letting me earn that chance? Would you consider allowing me to try to prove that I can be different? I thought about this question. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately, would have been so grateful for any sign of remorse that I would have welcomed her back with open arms. But I had learned hard lessons about the difference between words and actions, between temporary guilt and genuine change. What did you have in mind? I want to volunteer for the foundation. I want to help with the fundraising gala. I want to publicly support the work you're doing, even though it means acknowledging my own failures. This surprised me. You want to volunteer for an organization whose mission statement essentially describes you as the problem? Yes, because maybe if I help other mothers avoid what I put you through, maybe if I contribute to protecting other women from daughters like me, maybe I can start to make amends for what I've done. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving motives. But what I saw was exhaustion, genuine remorse, and something that might have been hope. Rebecca, if you volunteer for the foundation, you'll be working with women whose stories are similar to mine. You'll hear about daughters who excluded their mothers from holidays, who chose convenience over family, who broke their parents' hearts out of selfishness. Are you prepared to face that? I need to face that. I need to understand the full impact of what I did, not just on you, but on all the women who've suffered similar treatment. And when people ask why you're volunteering for an organization founded by your own mother to address the kind of treatment you gave her, I'll tell them the truth, that I was a terrible daughter who hurt someone I love, and that I'm trying to do better. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into my driveway. Through the window, I saw Michael getting out of his car, followed by Sophie and Oliver. I brought backup, Rebecca said with a weak smile. The kids have been asking to see you, and Michael wants to apologize too. Michael approached the front door with his shoulders set in determined lines, while Sophie and Oliver hung back near the car, clearly uncertain about what was happening. Catherine, Michael said as he reached the porch, I owe you an enormous apology. I should have spoken up months ago when Rebecca was treating you poorly. I should have insisted you be included in family events. I should have been a better son-in-law. Michael, you don't owe me. Yes, I do. I enabled Rebecca's behavior because it was easier than confronting it. I went along with excluding you because I didn't want to deal with family drama. I chose the path of least resistance, and that path led to you being hurt. He looked directly at me. I want you to know that going forward, if you give us another chance, you will always be included in family events, not as an afterthought, not when it's convenient, but as a valued member of our family. Sophie approached hesitantly. Grandma Catherine, are you mad at us? I knelt down to her level. I'm not mad at you, sweetheart. I'm not mad at Oliver either. This is grown-up stuff that has nothing to do with how much I love you. But you are mad at Mom. I glanced up at Rebecca, who was watching this exchange with tears in her eyes. I'm hurt by some choices your mom made, I said carefully. But your mom is trying to make better choices now, and that's what matters. Oliver stepped forward. Grandma Catherine, will you come to our house for dinner sometime? I miss your cookies. The simple request from my 8-year-old grandson nearly broke my resolve. But before I could answer, Rebecca spoke up. Oliver, Grandma Catherine gets to decide if and when she wants to visit us. We haven't been very good at making her feel welcome, and she needs to know that things will be different before she comes back. I looked at Rebecca with surprise. It was the first time she had taken responsibility for the situation in front of the children. The first time she had acknowledged that the problem was her behavior, not my sensitivity. Mom, Rebecca continued, meeting my eyes, I know I have a lot to prove. I know words aren't enough, but if you're willing to let me try, I want to spend however long it takes showing you that I can be the daughter you deserve. And if I'm not willing, then I'll respect that decision, she said firmly. And I'll still volunteer for the foundation, still try to help other families avoid the mistakes I made. Because whether or not you can forgive me, the work you're doing matters. And I want to be part of making sure other mothers don't suffer the way I made you suffer. I stood up, looking at my family, my daughter who had hurt me so deeply, my son-in-law who had enabled that hurt, and my grandchildren who had been caught in the middle of adult failures. They were all looking at me with hope and uncertainty, waiting for me to decide whether redemption was possible. "All right," I said finally. "You can volunteer for the foundation. We'll see how that goes, and then we'll talk about the rest." Rebecca's face lit up with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. "Thank you, Mom. I won't let you down." "You already have let me down, Rebecca. The question now is whether you can learn to build me back up." As they drove away, I stood on my porch and thought about second chances, about the difference between forgiveness and trust, about whether people could really change or just become better at hiding who they really were. I wasn't ready to forgive Rebecca yet, but I was ready to watch her try to earn it. And maybe, if she worked hard enough and long enough, she might actually succeed. Let me know in the comments if you think Catherine is making the right choice, giving Rebecca this chance. And make sure you subscribe because the fundraising gala is going to be absolutely incredible. The December fundraising gala was everything I had hoped it would be, and more. Elegant, well-attended, and successful beyond my wildest dreams. We raised over $175,000 in a single evening, enough to fund our services for the next year and expand into neighboring counties. But the real success of the evening wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in the dozens of women who approached me throughout the night to share their stories, to thank me for giving voice to their experiences, and to tell me that the foundation had helped them understand they weren't alone. Rebecca had been working as a volunteer for 3 months by the time of the gala, and her transformation had been remarkable. She started by stuffing envelopes and making phone calls, but gradually took on more responsibility as she proved her commitment was genuine. More importantly, she had begun attending our support group meetings as an observer, listening to stories from women whose experiences mirrored what she had put me through. The impact on her was profound and visible. She would often leave meetings with tears in her eyes, finally understanding the full weight of what she had done. "Mrs. Morrison," said Helen, one of our regular group members, approaching me near the silent auction tables. "I wanted to thank you again for everything the foundation has done for me, and I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with your daughter." I looked across the room to where Rebecca was helping an elderly woman with her coat, her face animated as they chatted about something. "Rebecca has been incredibly helpful," I agreed. "More than that," Helen continued. "She really understands what we've been through. She told me about her own mistakes, about how she treated you before she understood better. It takes courage to face that kind of truth about yourself." I watched Rebecca help the woman to her car, then returned to begin breaking down the registration table. For 3 months, she had shown up every Tuesday for our support meetings, every Thursday for administrative work, and every weekend for community outreach events. She had never missed a commitment, never complained about the work, and never tried to minimize the experiences of the women we served. "Mrs. Morrison." I turned to find Linda, my old friend from the hospital, approaching with a glass of wine and a knowing smile. "Linda, I'm so glad you came tonight." "I wouldn't have missed it, Catherine. This is incredible. Look at what you've built." She gestured around the elegant hotel ballroom filled with people who had come out to support our cause. "It's been a team effort," I said. But Linda shook her head. "Don't be modest. You did this. You took your pain and turned it into something beautiful that's helping hundreds of women. I'm so proud of you." We chatted for a few minutes about the success of the evening, but I could tell Linda had something else on her mind. "Catherine, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "What's happening between you and Rebecca? I've been watching her tonight, and she seems different, more mature, more aware." I looked across the room again where Rebecca was now helping our photographer capture candid shots of attendees. She had volunteered for every aspect of the event planning, from venue selection to menu tasting to coordinating with vendors. "She's been volunteering for the foundation," I explained. "She wanted to make amends for how she treated me." "And how's that going?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been thinking about a lot lately. Better than I expected, honestly. She's been completely reliable, genuinely committed to the work, and willing to face some uncomfortable truths about herself. "Are you going to forgive her?" I considered this. 3 months ago, I would have said no without hesitation. Rebecca's betrayal had been too deep, too calculated, too revealing of her true character. But watching her work with our clients, seeing her genuine horror as she learned about the epidemic of elder abandonment, witnessing her quiet dedication to making amends, it had shifted something in me. "I think I already have," I said quietly. "I just haven't told her yet." Linda smiled. "And when will you tell her?" "When I'm sure she's changed for the right reasons, not just because the consequences of her behavior became uncomfortable." "How will you know?" "I'll know when she stops trying to prove herself to me and starts proving herself to herself." As if summoned by our conversation, Rebecca appeared beside us. "Mom, the photographer wants to get a few pictures of you with the board members, and Mrs. Patterson from the mayor's office would like to speak with you about partnering with the city on some initiatives." "Of course, Rebecca. Have you met my friend Linda? She was my colleague at the hospital for 15 years. Rebecca extended her hand with a genuine smile. "I've heard so much about you, Linda. Mom has told me wonderful stories about your time working together. And I've heard about the excellent work you've been doing with the foundation," Linda replied. "Your mother says you've been incredibly dedicated." Rebecca's expression grew serious. "It's the least I can do. The work this foundation does is so important, and I have a very personal understanding of why it's necessary." After Rebecca left to guide me toward the photographer, Linda raised her eyebrows. "She really has changed, hasn't she?" "I think so, but we'll see if it lasts once the spotlight fades." The photographer took several group shots with board members and major donors, but the picture I treasured most was a candid shot he captured of Rebecca and me working together to pack up leftover materials at the end of the evening. In the photo, we're both laughing at something one of us had said, our faces relaxed and natural. It was the first picture of us together in over a year where we both looked genuinely happy. After the last guests had left and the venue was cleaned up, Rebecca offered to drive me home. "You must be exhausted," she said as we walked to her car. "You've been going nonstop all evening." "I'm energized," I replied honestly. Nights like this remind me why I started the foundation. Seeing all those people come together to support our mission, hearing the stories from women we've helped, it makes everything worthwhile. Rebecca was quiet for a moment as she started the car. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you first started the foundation, was it primarily about revenge? About making me pay for what I did to you?" The question surprised me with its directness. "Why do you ask?" "Because I've been thinking about motivations a lot lately, about why people do the things they do, about whether good actions count if they're done for selfish reasons." I thought about her question as we drove through the quiet city streets. Initially, yes, there was an element of wanting you to face consequences for your choices, but that wasn't the primary motivation, and it certainly isn't now. What is the primary motivation? Preventing other women from suffering the way I suffered, creating resources for people who find themselves abandoned by their families, building a community for women who've been told they don't matter. Rebecca nodded. And the fact that it also exposed my behavior to our social circle? That was a side effect, not the goal. Though I won't pretend I didn't appreciate the irony of you having to explain to your friends why your mother was running an organization for abandoned elderly women. Rebecca actually laughed at this. "You know, Amanda Richardson told me last week that she thinks I'm lucky to have a mother who turned her pain into something so constructive. She said most people would have just gotten bitter and withdrawn." "What did you tell her?" "I told her she was right and that I was grateful I had the chance to learn from my mistakes before it was too late to fix them." We pulled into my driveway, but neither of us moved to get out of the car. "Rebecca," I said finally, "I need to tell you something." She turned to face me, her expression wary. "What is it?" "I'm proud of you, the work you've done with the foundation, the way you've faced your own mistakes, the genuine care you've shown for our clients. I'm proud of the person you're becoming." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Does that mean?" "It means I think you've learned something important about what it means to value people instead of just using them. It means I believe your commitment to change is genuine. And us, our relationship?" I reached over and took her hand. I'd like to try again, carefully with clear boundaries and honest communication, but yes, I'd like to try. Rebecca squeezed my hand tightly. Thank you, Mom. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I promise I won't waste it. You deserve the chance to become the person you're capable of being, I said, and I deserve to have a daughter who values me. Let's see if we can make both of those things happen. As I walked up to my front door, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Hope for my family's future. Not the desperate hope of someone begging for scraps, but the quiet confidence of someone who had established their own worth and was now willing to share it with others. Rebecca had a long way to go before I would fully trust her again. But for the first time since July 4th, I believed that journey was possible. And that was enough to start with. 1 year later, I stood in the same hotel ballroom where we had held our first fundraising gala. But this time, the event was even larger. The Forgotten Mothers Foundation had grown beyond anything I had imagined. We now served over 600 women across 4 counties, had partnered with the state on elder services initiatives, and had been recognized by the governor for our innovative approach to addressing family estrangement. But the real measure of our success wasn't in numbers or awards. It was in the transformation of individual lives. Women who had found community after isolation. Mothers who had discovered their worth after abandonment. Families who had learned to heal after betrayal. Mrs. Morrison, said Jennifer Foster, the Foundation's executive director, approaching me near the head table, the governor is ready to present the Community Service Award whenever you're ready. I nodded, straightening my dress, a beautiful emerald green gown that Rebecca had helped me select. My daughter had insisted on taking me shopping for the occasion, wanting me to look absolutely stunning for what she called my crowning achievement. As I made my way to the podium, I caught sight of my family at table 5. Michael was there with his characteristic warm smile, and Sophie and Oliver were fidgeting in their formal clothes but looking proud to be included in Grandma Catherine's big night. Most surprisingly, Patricia Whitman was there too, having become one of our most consistent volunteers after her own experience with family rejection following her remarriage. She had learned the hard way that replacing someone didn't guarantee you wouldn't be replaced yourself. But it was Rebecca who caught my eye. She was wearing the navy blue dress we had chosen together, and her face was radiant with genuine pride. Over the past year, she had become not just a volunteer, but an advocate, speaking at community events about the importance of maintaining relationships with aging parents and the devastating effects of elder abandonment. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, looking out at the crowd of over 400 supporters. When I started the Forgotten Mothers Foundation 2 years ago, I was a woman who felt invisible, discarded, and forgotten by the person I loved most in the world. I found Rebecca's eyes in the crowd and saw her nod encouragingly. I thought my story was unique, that my pain was somehow deserved, that I had done something wrong to earn such treatment from my own family. But what I discovered was that my experience was not unique at all. Thousands of elderly women suffer in silence as their adult children gradually push them out of their lives, choosing convenience over connection, social advancement over family loyalty. The room was completely silent. Everyone focused on my words. The foundation was born from that pain, but it has grown into something much larger than one woman's hurt feelings. It has become a beacon of hope for women who thought their value had expired, a reminder that we are never too old to matter, never too inconvenient to deserve love, never too much trouble to warrant inclusion in the families we helped create. I paused, thinking about how far we had all come. Tonight I want to tell you about Margaret, who hadn't spoken to her children in 3 years until our mediation services helped them understand the impact of their neglect. I want to tell you about Dorothy, who was suffering from severe depression after being excluded from family holidays until our support groups showed her she wasn't alone. I want to tell you about Helen, who was considering ending her own life until she found purpose again through our volunteer programs. The crowd was moved to tears, and I could see several people reaching for tissues. But most importantly, I want to tell you about redemption, about second chances, about the possibility that even the most broken relationships can be healed when people are willing to face their mistakes and commit to doing better. I looked directly at Rebecca, who was crying openly. My daughter Rebecca is here tonight, not just as my family member, but as one of our most dedicated volunteers and advocates. 2 years ago, she was the reason I needed this foundation's services. Tonight, she's one of the reasons other families won't need them. Rebecca stood up at her table, tears streaming down her face, and began to applaud. The rest of the room joined her in a standing ovation that went on for several minutes. Rebecca's transformation reminds us that the cycle of elder abandonment doesn't have to continue, that adult children can learn to value their aging parents, that families can heal from even the deepest wounds, that love, real love, requires action, not just words. I paused as the applause died down, preparing for my final thoughts. When I was discarded by my own daughter, I had 2 choices. I could become bitter and withdrawn, or I could transform my pain into purpose. I chose purpose. I chose to use my heartbreak to help other women avoid the same suffering. I chose to build something meaningful from something devastating. But the real victory isn't just that I survived my daughter's rejection. The real victory is that she learned to reject the person she had become and chose to be someone better. The real victory is that other families are learning from our mistakes. The real victory is that no woman has to suffer in silence anymore, wondering what she did wrong to deserve abandonment. I raised my champagne glass, which had been waiting on the podium. Tonight we celebrate not just the success of the Forgotten Mothers Foundation, but the triumph of love over convenience, of commitment over comfort, of choosing to show up even when it's hard. We celebrate the idea that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, effort, and the daily decision to value each other. And to those adult children who are here tonight, who are listening to this story and recognizing themselves, I want you to know this. It's not too late. It's never too late to choose love over convenience, to choose inclusion over exclusion, to choose your parents' hearts over your own comfort. The room erupted in applause again, and I stepped down from the podium feeling lighter than I had in years. Rebecca met me halfway across the room, wrapping me in a hug that felt different from any embrace we'd shared in the past. This one wasn't desperate or guilty or obligatory. This one was full of genuine love, respect, and gratitude. "Mom," she whispered in my ear, "thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for showing me who I could become instead of just accepting who I was." "Thank you for doing the work to become that person," I whispered back. "Thank you for proving that people can change when they really want to." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself surrounded by the family I had thought I'd lost forever. Sophie and Oliver were showing me pictures they'd drawn of Grandma Catherine's work. Michael was discussing plans for our upcoming family vacation. A real vacation where I was included from the planning stages. Even Patricia was sharing stories about her volunteer work with our legal advocacy program, having learned valuable lessons about humility and the importance of treating all family members with respect. But it was Rebecca who surprised me most. "Mom," she said as we gathered our things to leave, "I have something for you." She handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a simple silver necklace with a pendant that read, "Chosen Family." "I know that blood makes us related," she said, "but I want you to know that I choose you every day now. Not because I have to, not because it's expected, but because you're an amazing woman who deserves to be valued and included and celebrated." I put on the necklace with trembling hands, feeling the weight of it against my chest like a promise. "Rebecca," I said, 2 years ago, I thought I had lost my daughter forever. Tonight, I realized I didn't lose you. You were just lost, and finding your way back to who you were meant to be has been the greatest gift you could have given me." As we walked out of the hotel together, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The rejection that had felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of something much more valuable. Not just a restored relationship with my daughter, but a purposeful life that was helping hundreds of other women. Rebecca's cruelty had broken my heart, but my response to that cruelty had created something beautiful. Her abandonment had devastated me, but my refusal to stay abandoned had built something lasting. Most importantly, Her eventual choice to face her mistakes and work to become better had proven that redemption was possible, that love could triumph over selfishness, that families could heal from even the deepest wounds. "Mom," Rebecca said as we reached our cars, "I know I can never undo the pain I caused you, but I want you to know that every day I wake up grateful that you gave me the chance to become someone worthy of being your daughter." "And I wake up grateful that you chose to become that person," I replied. "It would have been easier to stay who you were, to blame me for being too sensitive or demanding. But you chose the harder path of real change, and that choice has made all the difference." As I drove home that night, I thought about the women who would benefit from our foundation's expanded services, about the families who would avoid the pain we had experienced, about the mothers who would never have to wonder if they matter to their children. But mostly, I thought about second chances, about the power of refusing to accept unacceptable treatment, and about what happens when someone's worst behavior forces you to discover your own strength. Rebecca had tried to erase me from her life, but instead she had helped me write the most meaningful chapter of my own story. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. Thank you for joining me on Catherine's incredible journey of heartbreak, strength, and ultimate triumph. Her story reminds us that we should never accept being treated as disposable by anyone, not even our own children. Sometimes the people who hurt us most give us the greatest gift, the motivation to build something beautiful from our pain. Catherine's revenge wasn't about destroying Rebecca, though she certainly could have. Her revenge was about refusing to stay destroyed, about building a legacy that would outlast the betrayal, and about proving that her worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's recognition. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt discarded or undervalued by family members, please know that you have the power to write your own ending. You have the power to choose purpose over bitterness, growth over stagnation, and your own worth over anyone else's opinion. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We share stories like this every week about people who refused to be broken by betrayal and instead built something incredible from their pain. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story, and share this video with someone who needs to hear Catherine's message. Let's build a community of people who refuse to be erased, who choose their own value, and who turn their pain into power. Drop a comment below telling me about a time when you had to choose between bitterness and building something better. I read every single one. Remember, you are never too old to matter, never too inconvenient to deserve love, and never too forgotten to build something unforgettable. Until next time, keep choosing yourself, keep building your worth, and keep refusing to be anyone's second choice.